divide polynomials, but I'm going to use a process called synthetic division. Now, synthetic division has some characteristics or some conditions that you're going to have to follow before you can actually use it. So it makes it a little bit limited, but quite frankly, most of the synthetic divisions that you would do are pretty common. Let me say that again. Most of the polynomials that you would be dividing are pretty common. So for example, if you have some kind of a trinomial divided by a binomial, which is a fairly common problem, and it's a useful one too, you could use synthetic division. Now, what are some of the conditions that you have to follow? Well, first of all, you have to be dividing by just a binomial, so anything else besides a binomial won't work. Your binomial has to have an exponent or a degree of 1, which again means that your exponent has to be 1, and it can't be like x squared plus 3 because that won't work either. And then finally, your binomial has to have a coefficient of 1. So in other words, the number in front of the x has to be 1. Now again, that seems kind of limiting, but as I mentioned before, these are actually pretty common problems, and they're also pretty useful ones as well. Okay, so let's get started to how to use synthetic division. Synthetic division is a method that was developed using just the coefficients and not the x's themselves. So this is what you do. Write an upside down long division sign. And look at the numbers in the numerator. It'd be 1, 5, and 6. And write those up here. 1, 5, and 6. The next thing you do is look at the binomial in the denominator. And you'll notice that it's x plus 3. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take the opposite of the plus 3. So if you had, in this case it'll be minus 3. So you put minus 3 out here. Let's assume, for example, that this binomial had been something like, I don't know, x minus 7. You would take the opposite of the minus 7 and you'd put plus 7 here. So in other words, take the opposite of whatever's here in your binomial in the denominator. And again, in the numerator, just take the coefficients, the 1, the 5, and the 6. Now if there's a gap, and let's go down here. Let's say I have something like x cubed plus x minus 2. You'll notice that I'm missing an x squared if I had perfect descending order. So what I'm going to use is what's called a dummy variable. A dummy variable just holds the place without really adding anything to the polynomial itself. And I put the dummy variable because I want to use the 0. So in order to actually solve this one, I would say the coefficients would be 1, 0, 1, and negative 2. And again, that would go up here if that were the polynomial that I was using in my division problem. So there's one of the first cautions. Make sure that you use a dummy variable. And remember, a dummy variable just holds a place. Okay, so let's go back up here. How to use synthetic division. The first number you bring down. And now it's just a series of multiplications. Let me say it again. This is just a series of multiplications and additions. You take the negative 3 times the 1, and you'll get negative 3. And you bounce it up and put it right in there. So you go negative 3. Now you're going to add those two numbers. And you're going to get positive 2. Now you start the process over again. Negative 3 times negative 2, bounce it up into here, and you're going to get negative 6. Now you're going to add these two numbers here, and you're going to get 0. Now you're at the end of your problem. Now you have 1, 2, and 0, again the end of your problem. What do you do with those numbers? What does it tell you? Well, in your next step, let's call this step 1, we'll call this step 2, and let's call this step 3. These numbers are now coefficients for your answer. So what you do is you start with, if I had x squared up here, what you'll start down here, this becomes the coefficient for the next one down. So this would be like for the x. Let me just write that in here. So you'd say 1x plus 2 with the remainder of 0. Your answer then is just x plus 2. Now what does that mean? Basically this is saying, and we'll just call this step 4, this will be my check. What you are saying is that x plus 2 times x plus 3, whatever you were dividing by, should equal the numerator. And let's see if that's true. X plus 2 times x plus 3 should be equal to x squared plus 5x plus 6. Let's see if that's true. Let's FOIL that. X squared plus 3x plus 2x plus 6 gives me x squared plus 5x plus 6. So the answer actually checks. Okay, so let's try another example so just get the idea of this. We'll call this example 2. Okay, so let's say my problem now is a little bit different. Let's say I have x to the 4th minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 3. And let's say I want to divide that by x plus 1. Okay? Now again, let's go through all the steps. Let me just take this. And actually, let me just write this on a separate sheet of paper so I can actually have a little bit extra room. So bear with me for just a second. Okay, so now the first thing I'm noticing here is that I am missing the x cubes. So I'm going to rewrite this with the dummy variable. So I've got now x to the 4th plus a 0 x cubed, there's my dummy, minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 3. I'm noticing that my binomial has a degree of 1, a coefficient of 1, so it fulfills my conditions for synthetic division. And now I can go ahead and start my second step. So my second step goes like this. Take the coefficients, 1, 0, negative 3, 4, negative 3. And then you take the opposite of the constant down here, which is a negative 1. And now I can go ahead and start my process. Remember how it went. The first number you bring down. Multiply negative 1 times 1, bounce it up into here, and you get 1. Remember to add these two. That gives me a 1 there. Do the process over again. Negative 1 times 1, bounce it up into here, and you get negative 1. Add those two, you're going to get negative 4. Do the bounce thing again, so negative 1 times negative 4 is positive 4. Add those two, and one last time, negative 1 times 8 gives me negative 8. Add those two, and you get negative 11. Again, these are the coefficients for my answer. Let's see what that means. Remember that we started with x to the 4th, so our answer is going to start with x to the 3rd. It's always 1 less than the leading term. So it's going to be 1x cubed. Now just go straight down the line. Plus 1x squared minus 4x to the first plus 8 with the remainder, and then you can do it this way. You could say plus negative 11 over what you're dividing by, over your binomial. And that would be the answer to that problem. Okay, I hope that helped. Just practice a couple more of these and you should be okay. Just follow the video. Thanks.